Hey you guys, this is Josh with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. This week I am honored to have Brandon Sheard, the Farmstead Meatsmith, hanging out with us today. And we've been here in Oklahoma at Brandon's place, filming all week a class for the School of Traditional Skills. And Brandon obliged me to come on to the Pantry Chat today so that you guys could get to know him a little bit, and we could talk a little bit about curing meat, something that's near and dear to your heart.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. But before we do that, we always get into a little bit of chit chat and what's going on. And so, Brandon, what is up with you outside of like this week? And we've been working and filming, and so on your farm here, what's going on with you and your family lately?
Yeah, well, the big thing is the learning curve. We are learning our land. We just relocated to a new state, so I'm trying to learn all the understory species, the names of the trees, of the grasses, of the kind of pastures out in the soil. So that's actually very enjoyable. But we're bringing on livestock because we're in spring.
That's right.
And the thing about this region is that the grass grows at the speed of light. Like you can just watch it with the naked eye. And it's incredible. So I'm trying to get some grazers on the ground and manage the pasture. So we just got a whole bunch of goslings recently.
Awesome. Goslings, how many?
Yes, I think I have 16 out there.
Woo, all right.
Yeah, so it's going to be loud, but they're excellent grazers. So I think they're going to help us mow, you know?
So with like beef and sheep, you can generally, on a beef cow is the standard for measuring like how much an animal consumes.
Yes.
And then you can rate sheep against them. And right, we're not raising a bunch of goslings, but we have Canadian geese, like 20 or 30 of them. And I've got some new pasture I'm trying to get going, and I'm watching them eat my grass. And maybe you have an answer for this since you're going to actually graze that many.
Yeah.
I'm watching them going like, how many geese does it take to equal one cow in one cow day out on the pasture?
Yeah.
Have you thought like what that batch of geese is going to do and how much grass it's going to consume? And
I haven't calculated it, but the remarkable thing about them is that they do graze, and it's almost strange to see a bird graze with a bill because it seems very inefficient. But they literally do. They like nothing more than to do that all day. They're just snipping
85% of their diet.
Oh my goodness, it's remarkable. And they're very easy on the pasture. Like there is no scratching like chickens do. There's no massive damage to muddy areas like a cow might do, or ducks will do that too. That they'll drill their beaks and just spread mud. But geese are they're very gentle, and all they want to do is eat grass. That's their superpower.
Wow. And they're fertilizing at the same time.
Yes.
But you don't have a big pile to step into. So that's kind of nice for a small holding.
Yes.
So are you gonna like, you have a method, are you gonna move them, like rotate them in netting? Is that the plan, or a little more free because they're geese and they're smaller? Are you gonna do a little more like just kind of free range them with multi-species or something?
Yeah, I think for this first run this year, it's going to be more free ranging. They do have a very strong herding instinct, which is kind of nice, which means they stay as a flock.
Okay. And
ducks are very similar, and they tend to stay relatively close to home base. Especially larger breed geese, which is what these are. They're Emden, so they can't fly. Okay. They're going to be anchored to the ground, which makes them very easy to contain, even with pretty short fencing. And I think that we're just going to let their flock behavior kind of guide where they go for the first year and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
You know, and I imagine we'll introduce some slightly more permanent fencing within the larger paddocks we have to better manage them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got another topic. We're going to talk about curing meat today, but I'm curious because we love geese. We have just one breeding pair. We raise a few every year, and we harvest them and love cooking them at special feasts. You're doing it at a much larger scale, so it makes me think about the actual butchering. Yeah. Because geese are kind of tough.
Yes.
So, like, how are you cracking that nut, so to speak?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a lot to process at once. Have you got a method that is, efficient and works well?
Yeah. Yeah, I find that with geese, because you harvest them when they're so mature, 6 months old or so, they're fully fledged. And so you're less likely to hit them at that horrible spot when they're right about to molt, and so they're growing new feathers, which is when you get the pin feathers. That's more of a common thing that's hard to avoid with ducks. And so far with the many, many geese that I've slaughtered just through my work, I've been able to avoid that pin feather stage. That's just a big part.
So that's the big deal right there to make the defeathering job much easier.
Yes. And so
excuse me.
And one way to do that is to note, if you see feathers all over your farmyard, don't slaughter the geese yet.
Okay.
That means they're blowing their feathers and they're gonna put on new ones. And you just want to be sure before you slaughter them that they're fully fledged, that they've got full, nice, long, beautiful, mature flight feathers.
Yeah.
And that'll be your best bet at avoiding that pin feather stage.
Awesome.
And I like to keep it simple. I divide the slaughter into 2 days with geese because the primary yield for me from a goose is its fat. Yeah. And so much of that fat is wound up in its viscera. It's along its small intestines. Yeah. And so what I do is I do the kill, the scalding, the plucking on day one, and then I chill them all in my walk-in or just in a cool spot in the barn. I'll hang them so there's airflow, and they'll get chilled all the way through with their guts in and everything. And then the next day I do the evisceration. And I actually pull the guts out. By that point, the fat is chilled and it's solid.
It's a lot easier to work with.
And it's way easier to work with.
Yeah.
It's cleaner. It's not the big messy hose job, spraying water everywhere that eviscerating is on the kill day. It's actually a cleaner job. You can do it inside, It's kind of nice. So that's how I divide that job up. It helps a lot.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, and the thing I like about geese and why I think it's worth talking about a little bit more here is because for small holdings and people that have smaller areas, that there's a grazing animal that you could be putting to use that's not too hard to manage and it's got some productivity for you and use up some of that grass if you're not ready for larger animals, ruminant or something. Yeah. Very cool. Well, we're going to dive right in. We're talking about curing meat today, and Brandon is just the guy to talk to when it comes to curing meat, particularly pork, which is what we're talking about right now. And, I know pigs are an integral part of your farm, and we're just starting out. We've been raising pigs seasonally for many, many, many years. Yeah. But we're just actually going to farrowing and starting our own program, so they're going to become much more of an integral part of our farm. And the goal is to get that to the stage so that we can enjoy the fruit of those labors and also be learning how to cure and store meat other ways besides just the freezer. Yeah. Right. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. And maybe you want to just start off talking a little bit about a few of the different ways of curing, or maybe not even curing, just freezer would be one method. Yeah. And how you kind of arrived to where you're at doing what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah, for us, it was really discovering the simplicity of the process of curing using traditional methods that don't necessitate the use of a freezer. It's so easy. And then you pair that with the fact that it is so unarguably delicious that it's like you can't go back. Yeah. Once you see the ease of it and the flavors, it's too good. It's almost too good to be true. Except it's true. Well, and one of the challenges is that it is so easy that it's almost hard to believe. Yeah. Right. And we learned to cure bacon from you years ago from some of your early videos. And I remember, having those pork bellies in the refrigerator to get that started and then getting them hung and looking at them and going, really? Is this I can do this? Is this okay? Was that easy? And is it really that safe? Yeah. Do you hear that a lot? Yeah, definitely. And I find in the classes that I teach, there's almost this anticlimactic feeling when we get to the curing because, it's basically like, here's fresh, healthy pork. Here's some salt. Put the salt on the pork. Rinse it off and hang it. And you're done. That is the process. And so the thing that is difficult to learn in curing meat is not the memorizing of complex recipes or extravagant, methods or measurements or complex apparatus. It's just to believe that it is as simple as it is. Yeah. Because none of the meat that is produced today or that we purchase in a grocery store is even remotely like what you might cure at home. It is unnecessarily complex and for good reason. It's dirty, it's transported thousands of miles, it's handled in thousands of environments. So yes, that meat, it's not going to cure as simply as your good homegrown meat or locally sourced pork. So it's just, it's so simple, and it does help to have that refrigerator just for that salting stage too. Well, and I think, and it's one of the neat things about the time that we're in is we can take advantage of some of the old skills and bring some of those back and learn some of those that are real benefit, but still using the technology that we have to make that doable.
Yeah.
And this is one of those places where we're all trying to do so much. People are trying to work, and yet we want to pick up these skills and incorporate them into our lives.
Yeah.
And so the refrigerator is a nice place in your method and what you do that allows us to do this traditional skill, so to speak, in a modern context.
Yeah.
And it makes it doable, makes it achievable.
Yeah.
And I think it just helps our confidence a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It gives you a cool place without insects.
Yeah.
So basically what it is, it's what your ancestors would have used winter for, which is winter is the time you kill the pig.
Yeah.
That's when you put all the meat on the salt. Now, you can use a refrigerator to be your out of season winter time for the curing of your pork.
Right.
And that does make it a lot easier.
So, so we're talking salt curing, which is very, very simple. Can you give us just a basic overlay of what that looks like? I mean, I know we've got different cuts.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we want to just take bacon. We all love bacon if we've got pork. And just a quick walkthrough, what does it take? How long does it take to get, a side of bacon going?
Yeah. So if you can start with a healthy pig with the skin on the belly, you're like 90% there. Like you've done the hard work. If it's healthy, it's eaten well and it's been killed well. It's been harvested well.
Yeah, it's so important.
Then you have clean meat. You're starting with clean meat. You're not starting with dirty meat that you have to salt excessively just to prevent it from spoilage. The clean meat, like all you need to do is remove some water. So that's the process.
When you say dirty meat, let's back up a little bit because I don't think you're talking just about like meat that got some dirt or dust on it.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of that.
You're just talking just good harvesting procedure.
Yeah.
Besides raising the animal and feeding them cleanly.
Yes.
So from that, your feed source all the way through to just getting it, to the table where you're prepping it here.
Yeah.
And everything's just clean.
Yeah, it's a good point. The main thing is definitely the quality of the feed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. And that definitely gives you a cleaner pig. Literally, less toxins in its flesh if it's not in the pig's diet. Yeah. It's just not going to have it. And that makes it, again, easier to cure. But then even supermarket pork is handled so many times and distributed over thousands of miles before it gets to you. So I do think it is literally more dirty.
Yeah.
And the way that they tend to transport it is wrapped in plastic. So not only is there more bacteria introduced to the surface of the meat, but then they put it in something that's anaerobic in plastic.
Which is hard in our modern world. We think that's like protecting it.
Right.
Right. And maybe in that context it is because it is changing hands so much that probably that plastic probably is protecting it.
Yeah.
But it's also damaging it.
Yeah.
As far as keeping that meat clean and pure.
Exactly.
Because what does that anaerobic environment do?
Yeah, that creates the possible conditions for botulism, for the creation of that Clostridium botulinum bacteria to proliferate and release that spore in an anaerobic environment. Now, it's, very puritanically kept in very low temperatures the whole time it's transported. But even then, when you get that meat, or even like when a butcher gets it at a grocery store, and you open up that bag, the meat is slimy. It has a surface slime growing on it.
I remember that opening packs of bacon when I was a kid.
Yes.
I never thought of it much then.
Yeah.
Now, and that's what comes to mind when you say that. I remember those packages. I would make ham sandwiches as a kid. Yeah, I remember that.
That is bacteria.
Yeah.
That is bacteria colonizing the surface. And I have the luxury of, raising my own pigs and butchering them. You'll notice, even the pork we worked with this week, it's dry. The skin is dry.
Yeah.
It's not leaving puddles of water or slime on the table as we work with it. And that's just because it's cleaner.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that commercial pork for a minute and curing, because is that really cured, what we're getting?
Yeah.
What they're calling ham, what we're getting at the store, is it really cured?
No, it's been flavored. So when they cure bacon or ham today and they sell it at the grocery store, one of the things actually that they have to prove before they can be licensed to sell it is that it is not cured for preservation, but only for flavoring. And that's just the way they...
So we're getting ripped off a bit even.
Yeah.
We're really getting sold something that isn't what it is.
Yeah, it's not cured. If you were to take out, even if you bought slab bacon at the grocery store and unwrapped it and tried to hang it in your kitchen, it would probably go off because most of the bacon is cooked. It's pre-cooked when you get it. And in the smoking process, they cook it. And even before that, it takes the factory just like a day or two to cure bacon, to make bacon. And that's because they're using nitrite or synthetic cure ingredients that actually pass through the meat faster than salt does. Salt actually takes a while to equalize throughout the meat. Whereas these synthetic ingredients, they pass through within hours, and they do it in refrigeration temperatures.
Yeah.
And that's what is so appealing to the industrial production of meat.
One of the things that's amazing to me about this is you can go and buy this, this meat from the store that's supposedly been taken care of in this industrial method, and it's safe and it's good and it's clean, and you leave it out and it's going to go bad.
Yeah.
You can take what you do and what we do, and many of us are doing with curing with salt, and take your raw meat, cure it with salt, and leave it out, and it goes good, as you've said many times this week. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
It really goes good. So tell us a little bit about then curing with salt and just some of the basics of it, and what's happening there. Why is that? Why is it so simple? And what's happening that's making that work when you're just taking a good cut of meat, say pork belly, and salt?
Yeah.
How does that come together and make this product that doesn't go bad but goes good?
Yeah. And really the simplicity comes from the fact that the function of the salt that is curing the meat is simple. It's just removing and binding water. That's all it is. It's not any more complex than that. It's not a ferment. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to nurture beneficial bacteria so it outcompetes the bad stuff and produces acid and lowers the pH. That's a more complex thing. That's salami, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But that is a little more sensitive as far as like the aging climate in which it's hanging. Whereas bacon, prosciutto, whole muscle cures that aren't ground, but just a slab of meat, you just need to dry those out with the aid of salt. And that's all it's doing. Because if that meat is going to spoil, it's going to be because of free water. So just puddled, available water. That is where bacteria can get in and proliferate.
So the curing of meat is really just the removal of the water. That's all we're doing. We're just using the salt to remove the water. And that preserves it to where you can leave it up there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute for indefinitely, more or less. Yeah. The product changes. So very cool. So how long, let's talk about how long it takes to cure, bacon. How long does it take you to get from start? You got your pork belly and you got some salt. How long does it take to get a usable product? And maybe let's talk about bacon and then prosciutto, which is ham, which I just learned. Prosciutto, sorry. Is really just ham.
Yeah.
In Italian form.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to get bacon?
So I'm going to say 5 days because that's one way to do it. But honestly, you could do it in 3 days or 2 weeks. This is the funny thing that it's so flexible and simple that a lot of these times, they're not hard and fast recipes. The recipe or the method that I follow, it's 5 days more just out of simplicity. It's something that I can manage in the middle of a busy family life and an active farm and running a business and everything. But really, if you were to put a couple handfuls of salt on a pork belly and put it in your fridge for about 3 days, and then take it out and rinse it off and dry it and hang it, that would cure. That would cure the belly.
When you say dry, you're literally just patting it dry.
You're not
doing anything special. You're not setting it in the sun, dehydrator. You're just
patting it dry with towels after you've rinsed off any salt that remains. So in its barest, simplest form, like that will work. And then the only subtlety or the craft or the refinements that you might make to that process, those come in when you're trying not to over salt. Okay. And you're trying to remove just enough water with the salt to allow the bacon to go good, but no more. You're salting it just to the minimum, just to what's necessary, because if you do that, then the bacon or anything that you hang will ripen and actually get better and develop more complex flavors with time.
That's going good.
Yeah, that's going good.
What's really interesting is when you do this for the first time, most people are worried about it going bad, right?
Yes.
And what's amazing is really the only way you can do this wrong is to over salt it.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the most common mistake. In fact, I have to say, after teaching thousands of students, hundreds of classes, I've never gotten a report of a spoiled belly.
Yeah.
And I've never lost a belly to spoilage. I've cured hundreds and hundreds of pounds of bellies. What I have done, and what others have done, is oversalt the belly.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing. That's not the end of the world. That just means you have a belly that tastes a little more salty.
And so you're gonna use it different,
Exactly.
right? Do something different. And you can even maybe talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
You can reduce that. You can extract some of the salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea if you have a belly that's just too salty to the taste. You can cut off a chunk that you want to eat and just soak it in water.
Yeah.
And if you give it like an hour of soak, it's going to pull salt out. Then you can slice and fry that up for breakfast and just hang what remains back up.
Wow. So how long can you store and say eat off a slab of bacon?
Until the end of the world, or you eat it.
That's
Whatever
my kind
comes
of
first.
preservation right there.
Yeah, it really never goes bad. And I should say, it will develop over time. So when it just comes off the salt, it's going to be very tender. It's still going to have some moisture to it, which is nice. And that is kind of the ideal texture for breakfast meat. That's how we usually think of it. You slice it and you fry it up for breakfast.
Right.
But then the longer it hangs, it gets more dense. And when it's really dense and really dry, it's actually more pleasurable and enjoyable just to slice it real thin and eat it raw, maybe with some pickled vegetables, because it'll be rich and fatty and delicious. So it's very flexible that way.
So now how about prosciutto? And let's talk about that, because that's the bacon. Usually you're rarely going to hang it as long as you can,
Right.
Because you're going to consume it.
Yes.
But you can put up a lot of bacon, hang it, and you've got a very simple, low technology stored meat,
Yeah.
which is really cool. But a prosciutto is something that can be stored, longer term.
Yeah.
And actually, you don't even want to use it until longer term. So tell us a little bit about prosciutto.
Yeah. Yeah. Prosciutto is the back leg of a pig, and every country in Europe has their version of it. It's the back leg of a pig that's been cured, and you want it to hang for a long time because that's how it ripens. It develops particular flavors. So in general, and again, you'll find exceptions all over the board because there are more ways to do this than not to do it. But in general, 2 years is about the minimum hanging time for a prosciutto, which is why this is such a thrifty way to consume pork, because it'll take you a little bit to go through the bacon, and by the time you've gone out of that, hey, your guanciale is ready to go, and that's the jowl, and you would cure that right with the bacon. And then by the time
Same
you get
way? Is
through
that
that,
salt cure?
Salt cure.
Okay.
I mean, in the same tub, cure it the exact same way.
Right.
And then maybe you've got the colpas, the shoulders, and then those are ready to go, and you get through those. And then, you can get to even the 2-year mark, and now it's time to cut into the prosciutto. So it's literally the most thrifty and extravagant way to consume pork.
That's one of the things I think is really neat that I learned this weekend. I just really didn't know that about prosciutto, and how you can take this whole leg and cure it. And we think of this as this fancy meat.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is. It's extravagant.
It's
the taste is so rich and beautiful. You don't need to eat a whole lot of it. But talk about a simple, quick way to preserve a lot of meat.
Yeah.
In a leg like that. To me, that's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing is you can pretty much cure just about a whole animal with this simple traditional method.
Yeah. And that's what they used to do. You can even find in Britain, up in the islands, where there are stone homes, and over, the beam over the door, it's all stone. It's completely stone.
Wow.
And engraved over the door is, 1623, the date of the building of that structure.
Yeah.
And you'll go in through this, it's those buildings with the stone shingles as the roof.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Slate,
Yeah, slate. And you'll find in one particular room a trough with drains gouged out on the side.
Okay.
And that is literally built into the structure of the building. That's the bacon curing trough.
Wow.
And it's the size of a pig.
Okay. So the drains for the moisture. So
That's
you put
right.
your salt down
Yes.
in there, but you put you could put was that made to put a whole pig
It's
in?
made to put a whole pig.
Wow.
Cut in half, so by side. They would still do one side at a time. Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing to me just how simple some of these things are, and kind of how duped we almost are in trusting our technology. Trusting our science is the word today, right?
Yeah.
And yet you buy store-bought meat, it's going to go bad on you if you leave it out. And raw milk's the same way. Milk, you buy the store-bought milk, you leave that out and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
But yet you can get milk the way God gave it to you and leave it out, and the flavor's going to change, the texture's going to change.
Right.
But it's still usable and even good. And so we can take a whole pig and just a little bit of what God gave us in salt and take care of that and preserve it.
Yeah.
And it goes good.
It goes
wonderful. It goes better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're wired to detect if it goes bad too.
Well, that's one of the common threads with raw milk, with fermenting vegetables. Hearing you talk this week about curing the pork and how to know. We're all worried about it. Is it going to go bad on us? Yeah. How do I know? And I know Carolyn says the same thing you've been saying all week, and we were doing a fermenting class with Lisa Bass about fermentation. She was saying the same thing. God, we know if it's gone bad.
Yeah.
Now it may go different. It may be something you're not used to. It may be too strong, or different things like that you've got to learn how to enjoy or that might be challenging, but it doesn't go bad.
Right.
Something that goes bad, you're going to know it.
Yes.
Right. And you were just saying we're made to know that.
Yeah. You're not going to be guessing.
Yeah.
And that actually that's a great confidence builder when it comes to curing meat, because it means you're not going to accidentally eat something that's going to make you sick when it comes to whole muscle cures. Salami's different. It's theoretically possible there for a toxin to be released that you can't see or taste or smell.
Well, it's a different process. You have a lot more surface area.
Exactly.
Opportunity for moisture. And different things going on.
Yeah. But with the whole muscles, like when they go bad, they go obviously bad.
Yeah.
Nobody doubts that it's gone.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So should you cook cured meats? Cured pork, just leaving it in that realm right now. Do you need to cook them? Or I guess the bigger question is, can you eat them raw?
Yes. Yeah, you can. And the way we do it is it's very much a matter of taste. The longer any cured meat you hang, whether it's bacon or prosciutto or guanciale or lomo, lonzo, the longer it hangs, the more dry and dense it becomes. And when it's that dry and dense, almost like wood, it can be really hard. It's more pleasant and enjoyable to do thin shavings and serve it with, with cheese or something and nice homemade bread. And you just eat it raw that way. Technically, you could eat it raw right off the salt, right after you've cured it, if you're starting with a healthy pig. And that's fine. It just might be a little chewy, especially with a belly. It's going to be less pleasant than frying it up, which is really when it's good, fresh, just off the salt.
That's part of the fun and part of the art of it with the cure too. And what I'm seeing and learning is that, you can find where you enjoy it most.
Yeah.
Or learn to enjoy it throughout its different stages.
Exactly.
We're so monocultural today. We just want one thing to taste this way.
Yeah.
Instead of like, you can take that bacon or this prosciutto right behind you and learn that you're going to have a different almost relationship with it, on the palate. Over seasons, over time.
Exactly.
And that I don't know, that makes the experience that much more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got to ask this question, and we've pretty kind of much answered it, but is there a place for nitrates and nitrites in all of this? Why or why not?
Yeah. I find that the only reason I don't use them is because they tend to homogenize the product. They tend to lend it a pink color and a very prototypical, mildly tangy flavor.
Okay.
That we all recognize. That is the flavor we have come to associate with cured meat. Such that when you cure meat with salt in your home and you taste it for the first time, you're going to be a little surprised, like, whoa, this is very different.
Yeah, it's got flavor
than what I thought cured meat tastes like. And that's because we're used to the flavor that nitrite gives to cured meat, which is mildly tangy. And it's not necessarily a carcinogen unless which it kind of has a reputation of being.
That discussion's gotten overblown. And Carolyn and I studying. Yeah. We used to think that was a big deal, big issue. I mean, people have been using, I forget which one comes first. Is it the nitrite, then they go down to nitrite? Is it the other way around?
Nitrate reduces to nitrite.
To nitrites. Yeah. But I mean, celery, they use celery, right?
Yeah.
For nitrates. Yeah. To preserve. People have been using these for a long, long time. In a sense, there is a traditional use of them.
That's right, and it's in the form of saltpeter.
Yeah.
And usually it's mined. There are mines in Bolivia. It's veins. You can see them in cave walls, and they mine it. Yeah. And that is potassium nitrate, which still has to be nursed into nitrite to even have an effect on the meat at all. Nitrate does nothing to meat. It has to be reduced to nitrite.
So it's a more complex process.
Yes,
as far as like for the homesteader, and the person wanting to apply this just simple curing method, it's not so much that these nitrites and nitrates are bad. Yeah, they can be used, and that's a different discussion. And we'd agree that that discussion's overblown. The fear of that. But it's a more complex process.
Yes.
Maybe a little harder to attain, to where salting is just a lot easier to get
It's
going.
a lot easier. It's a lot simpler, primarily because potassium nitrate, or if you purchase already isolated nitrite, you have to use them at the very, closely prescribed levels because they are so volatile. The problem with those is you don't want to overuse them.
So it's not as forgiving.
It's not as forgiving at all. You gotta follow a very close recipe, and you gotta follow it very closely so that you don't over nitrite it, because that is very dangerous.
Okay. So supplies needed. What does somebody need to get started?
Yeah, and I know I'm like a broken record, but if you just start with good pork, like you are 99% of your problems that you might encounter they're solved before you even get the salt down.
Yeah.
So just healthy pig, locally sourced, ideally.
Yeah.
Just keep it clean. So that's always number one. But then for curing meat at the most basic level, you just need some natural sea salt. So I prefer, you can even use mine salts, like Redmond salt will work. The mine salts have lots of other minerals in them, which add flavor, and they're great, but some of them aren't soluble. So they might leave a little mineral dust on your bacon.
And that's what we do. That explains something, because that's what we use. We use a lot of Redmond salt. It's just we buy in bulk and have a lot of it for everything. And we have definitely seen that it wasn't. I remember first seeing it and going, well, it shouldn't be moldy, and it definitely shouldn't be moldy already. Yeah. It just had that little dusting on it. Yeah. And so that explains that.
Yeah, and it's not a problem at all, It's a less salty salt. So it's kind of a good hedge against over salting. It's a good salt to use. And just, natural sea salt. So I avoid kosher salt because it is a manufactured salt. Mm-hmm. And it's not a flavorsome salt. It doesn't taste very good. It's just solid, what is it? Sodium chloride.
It's just pretty pure sodium chloride.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Totally icy. So it's very salty.
Yeah.
And the flake shape makes it dissolve very quickly.
Okay.
So it is easy to oversalt with kosher salt. So simple, fine grain sea salt, I think, is the way to go.
Very cool. Okay. So good pork, salt.
Good pork and salt.
What else do we need to get started?
It would be good to have curing vessels that are non-reactive. So this is the container that you're going to put the meat and the salt in. And you just basically don't want it to be aluminum. So it could be plastic, it could be wood, it could be porcelain, it could be glass. I prefer to use plastic, honestly, because I can drain it. I can have a self-draining tub, which is another way you can help yourself to not oversalt. Because if the meat's sitting in its own liquid that it's pulling out, it's going to get oversalted. Okay. And so if it has holes in the bottom of the tub, and that tub is nested in a solid tub, then it will drain away from the meat. Yeah. Which works perfect.
And so the bus tubs that you can get, at a restaurant supply, you can order them online, Amazon. Those things are ideal. Yeah. They fit on a shelf in your fridge. They'll generally hold an average size leg, right, or several bellies. Yeah. And you can easily drill some holes in them and stack two together, so one drains, one catches. Yes. And that's like just the kind of homesteader go-to.
Yeah, it works really well. And then if you live in the north, you can use the winter as your time to cure, because there's not a lot of flies, cool, even temperature. But then you can also get yourself a spare curing fridge. Yeah. And this is not a fridge that's like temperature and humidity controlled in any fancy fashion, just a spare fridge. Right? Yeah, that's just chilled, 35, 41, kind of going around in that zone, Fahrenheit. And that's where you will salt the meat. Yeah. During that fragile initial stage, you want it to be in a fly-free environment, and that's what that fridge tends to be.
For bacon, how long are you going to leave it in that cool environment before you can take it out and hang it up in your kitchen or your pantry?
Yeah, the recipe I like to follow is just 5 days.
Yeah. That does it. That does enough. That pulls the moisture, pulls enough moisture out.
That's right.
That you can then take it out of that cool environment. Yeah. And put it into room temperature?
Room temperature. Ambient temperatures in your house.
So you can get by even your own fridge if you can clear it out a little bit. Yeah. If you get started, and you have one pig and you want to do a few bellies, you could get by.
Absolutely.
Leave 5 days in the fridge, take it out, and then you can hang it. And
rinse it, dry it, and hang it.
Let it cure.
Yeah, and even the duration that it's in the fridge is very flexible. Really, it just needs to have sufficient quantity of salt pull out a sufficient amount of water. Yeah. Sometimes that can happen in 30 hours. Like, it's done. It's very quick. So if it's fine salt, it'll happen that much quicker than if it is coarse salt.
It's mind-blowing how simple this is. The first time we did it, I remember just stressing over, is there enough salt? Is there too much salt? Have we left it in the refrigerator long enough?
Yeah.
Should we flip it? Should we do this and that? And the more I learned, the more I realized just, no, you just have to be confident in the simplicity of it and what you're saying and what you're teaching, and it just works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, what's the best cut of meat to get started? I mean, is it the pork belly? Is that the easiest place?
I would have to say it's a pork belly. Yeah, that would be the simplest because it's quick and it doesn't have lots of contours or tricky cavities, and it's a quick turnaround. You pretty much within a week get the most delicious bacon you've ever tasted.
Well, best thing to do is either raise your own pig or go buy one from a local farmer, and maybe even have them cut it all up, but have them save you half of a belly or something.
Yeah.
If you're jittery, if you're like, wow, that sounds cool, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And just get started and try it out.
Yeah. And even if it's frozen, if you get your half pig back and that half belly winds up in the freezer, because bacon is not preserved through fermentation, we don't need there to be bacteria on the meat. So, which would kind of be taken out by the freezer, if it's in there long enough. It's just drying. So you can actually thaw out that belly and cure it, and it'll work.
Right on. So, how do people learn more? How do they tell them about what you do?
Yeah.
And how they can learn more. I know for us, even we try a lot of things, and we had heard all this and needed to come to you 6-7 years ago to find out more, to get some confidence. So what do you do and how can you help everybody out?
Yeah, I think that the most direct way is to go to farmsteadmeatsmith.com, and you can look at our upcoming classes, because we teach this in person here in the middle of the country in Oklahoma, and we go through the whole process. And you can actually fit the whole narrative in your brain. It's not complex, and we teach curing.
Very cool.
Very simply, and then you can also look at we have an online option. We have the Meatsmith membership, and you can sign up annually or monthly, and it's got an archive of over 50 videos, including how to cure meat, but also how to harvest everything. All livestock, and butcher it, and cure it, and cook it on a domestic scale, on the small scale.
Very, very cool. Brandon, thanks for having me this week.
Yeah.
It's been fun to hang out with you, and thanks for coming on here. And you guys go out, like we tell you about anything, go out and get started, find a path, and just go try something. Go get a belly and get going on this, because even the guys we had here, it was amazing to see some of these guys that were with us tasting this bacon for the first time. And I feel bad for them. I don't think they're going to be able to go back to the grocery store.
I couldn't.
No?
Yeah.
No?
I couldn't. It's been 10 years. Can't go back.
Been good hanging with y'all, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.